हेलो एवरीवन, जय हिंद एंड वेलकम टू द प्लेटफॉर्म ऑफ श्रीराम IAS वंस अगेन। आप सभी का स्वागत है एक बार फिर श्रीराम IAS के प्लेटफॉर्म पर। एंड इन टुडेज सेशन विल बी डिस्कसिंग अबाउट द हाई सीज ट्रीटी। हम आज के सेशन में हाई सीज ट्रीटी को डिस्कस करने वाले हैं। माय नेम इज भवर सिंह सरोई, आई एम एक्स NDA एज वेल एज क्वालिफाइड IAS एग्जाम इन 2012। और आज हम बात करने वाले हैं कि जो हाई सीज ट्रीटी है उसके चैलेंजेस क्या है, व्हाट आर द चैलेंजेस अहेड that remains for the high seas treaty. And this news is very important because kal iske upar in the Hindu there was a complete article, and that is why I am discussing this topic for you again. It is very important for your perspective and for your upcoming examination in UPSC. Alright, तो आगे बढ़ते हैं, but before moving ahead, let me tell you that we are offering you 1:1 free mentorship. Alright, with the जो हमारे जो trained mentors हैं उनके थ्रू आप जो है free mentorship ले सकते हैं wherever you are finding any problems for preparing for UPSC exam. कहीं पर भी आपको प्रॉब्लम आ रही है, कोई भी प्रॉब्लम है, कोई भी इशू है, कोई भी डिस्कशन आपको करना है, आपको सिर्फ एक बहुत छोटा सा काम करना है. यू जस्ट हैव टू डू वन थिंग एंड दैट इज देयर इज अ गूगल फॉर्म जो कि आपका डिस्क्रिप्शन में और साथ ही साथ कमेंट में आपका पिन्ड है. उस गूगल फॉर्म को आप फिल कर दें एंड देन यू कैन हैव वर्ड विद आवर मेंटर्स जो कि बेस्ट मेंटर्स हैं राइट नाउ. ऑलराइट, सो उनके थ्रू आप जो है प्रॉपर यू कैन गेट द मेंटरशिप. जो भी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, जो भी इश्यूज हैं, जो भी आपकी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, वो बिल्कुल आपका सॉल्व होंगी, इसकी गारंटी है. ऑलराइट, नाउ मूविंग अहेड, हम बात कर रहे हैं आपका हाई सीज ट्रीटी के बारे में. विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट हाई सीज ट्रीटी. नाउ व्हाई दिस हाई सी मैटर. ठीक है, पहली बात तो ये कि हाई सी है क्या, व्हाट इज द हाई सी. ठीक है, जब हम बात करते हैं हाई सी की तो व्हाट इज द हाई सी. हाई सीज आर बेसिकली दोज और दैट पार्ट ऑफ द ओशन जो कि आपका दैट इज नॉट गवर्न्ड बाय एनी कंट्री. ऑलराइट, जो कि आपका बिल्कुल फ्री है. ऑलराइट, सो व्हेन अगर बात करें आपका तो हाई सीज इट कवर्स अबाउट अप्रॉक्सीमेटली 64% ऑफ द ओशनिक सरफेस एंड दिस इज बियॉन्ड एनी नेशंस जुरिडिक्शन. इसके ऊपर किसी भी नेशन का कोई भी जुरिडिक्शन आपका नहीं रहता है. ठीक है, एंड इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर क्लाइमेट रेगुलेशन एज वेल एज बायोडाइवर्सिटी. जब क्लाइमेट रेगुलेशन की बात करते हैं तो बेटा जब हम बात कर रहे हैं वी नो दैट 70% ऑफ आवर अर्थ इज कवर्ड बाय द ओशंस. ठीक है, और साथ ही साथ जब हम बात करते हैं आपका, आपने एक टर्म पढ़ी होगी, यू मस्ट हैव heard about this term and that is carbon sequestration. And what is carbon sequestration? जहां पर कार्बन जो है वो आपका जमा हो जाती है, it gets stored. And when we talk about the oceans, they are very prominent. आप कह सकते हो very prominent instrumental when it comes to carbon sequestration. जो कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड है वो आपका जाकर यहां पर आपका जो है स्टोर हो जाती है. Alright, and that is why this is very very important for the climate regulation. And biodiversity की बात करें, when we talk about biodiversity, near about 80% of the oceans are unmapped. आपका जो oceans है 80% of the oceans are unmapped right now. Now coming to the next part of the session, and that is what is the high seas treaty. ये high seas treaty actually में है क्या, इसका जो एक्चुअल नाम है अगर हम बात करें, व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट द ऑफिशियल नेम इट इज BBNJ एग्रीमेंट या फिर बायोडाइवर्सिटी बियॉन्ड नेशनल जुरिडिक्शन. दैट इज द नेम, ऑफिशियल नेम ऑफ द हाई सी ट्रीटी. इसको हम हाई सीज ट्रीटी कहते हैं बट दिस इज द ऑफिशियल नेम. व्हाट वाज द पर्पस फॉर ब्रिंगिंग दिस treaty? Because we have marine biodiversity in the international water और उस marine diversity का जो proper protection and sustainable use जो है वो आपका किया जा सके, and that was the reason why this biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction और BBNJ और high seas treaty was made. और this is the first comprehensive legal instrument जो कि आपका UNCLOS के framework में आपका बनाया गया for the high seas conservation. Alright, now there is another term over here that is UNCLOS. तो UNCLOS क्या है? What is UNCLOS? UNCLOS is actually the treaty that governs the marine resources या फिर जो आपका nations का jurisdiction है उसको आपका govern करती है. UNCLOS is basically stands for United Nation Convention on the Law of the Sea. ठीक है, तो that is the UNCLOS. अभी हम आगे बात करेंगे इसका कि what is the UNCLOS and how it defines the marine boundaries या maritime boundaries कैसे define किया जाता है by the UNCLOS. All right, now what are the 4 key pillars of this high sea treaty? All right, the first one is marine protected area, that is those conservation zones. We have to establish those conservation zones jahan par aapka we have the high biodiversity, so they have to be developed or they have to be established like a marine protected zones या marine protected areas. साथ ही साथ MGR, that is marine genetic resources. Now these genetic resources are very much useful when it comes to pharmaceutical industries, when it comes to the different when we are talking about the food, marine food industries. So there these resources are quite useful, and the fair sharing of the benefits of this MGR or marine genetic resources benefits from the ocean biodiversity. All right, along with this, environmental impact assessment, where we can have a proper scientific evaluation. A proper scientific evaluation, especially in the marine protected regions where we have to conserve the oceanic biodiversity. So that is again a pillar of the treaty, High Seas Treaty or BBNJ Treaty. And then capacity and technology transfer, where we have to support the developing nations, the developing countries in ocean stewardship. So ये आपके 4 pillars है इस treaty के. Now, when it comes to the journey to the treaty, how this high sea treaty was formed. So initially there was UNCLOS treaty. All right, UNCLOS treaty was formed and it established framework for the oceanic governance कि किस तरीके से आपका oceanic boundaries और oceans को govern किया जाएगा. ठीक है, that was UNCLOS or United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. Later on in 2004, what happened was जो UNCLOS है, ठीक है, UNCLOS had defined the national jurisdiction in the regions which are there, surrounding the countries. But later on, what happened was that the high sea was, it was treated as, you can say that it was for everyone. All right, or you can say that it was, there was equitable sharing that was planned in the high seas. But at the same time, there were loops, there were something gaps which were present when it comes to the high sea protection. So 2004, from 2004, United Nations General Assembly, it formed a ad hoc working group, and ये जो ad hoc working group था, that started discussing the plans for protecting this high seas. All right. Later on in 2011, the countries, they sat together and they began the discussions how this high sea treaty will function. And from 2018 to 2023, there was formal negotiation that was launched for the BBNJ agreement or the high sea treaty, where we had 4 intergovernmental conferences which were held. Later on in 2023, especially in June 2023, the treaty was adopted after years of the international diplomacy. And right now, what is the condition for this treaty? All right, right now, there are more than 60 countries who have ratified the treaty in September 2025. A clause that was there कि ये treaty कम से कम 60 countries ratify करेंगी और उसी के बाद ये जो treaty है ये आपका लागू होगी. So now we have more than 60 countries, to be exactly 75 countries have ratified this treaty as of now, as of 1st of October 2025. So there are total 75 countries जिन्होंने कि इसको ratify कर दिया है, और ratification 60th ratification के 120 दिन बाद से ये ट्रीटी आपका लागू हो जाएगी, जो कि आपका इसके फ्रेमवर्क में, इस ट्रीटी में आपका गिवन था. सो दैट इज द कंप्लीट फ्रेमवर्क, कंप्लीट टाइमलाइन हाउ दिस ट्रीटी वाज फॉर्म्ड, और क्या इसकी एक टाइमलाइन थी. नाउ व्हाई नाउ, अगर हम बात करें तो ये ट्रीटी को अब फॉर्मुलेट करने का क्या मतलब था, एंड व्हाट आर द थ्रेट्स that are there in the ocean. The most important is overfishing. There is unregulated fishing that is depleting marine population at an alarming rate, especially when it comes to the countries whose economy depends on fishing industry. Like for example, we can take the example of Russia, we can take the example of Japan, we can take the example of Canada, who are now involved in overfishing, and especially I'm talking about the Arctic zone. Alright, again, it is very important to note over here. So overfishing, जो overfishing हो रही है, unregulating fishing है, वो उसको रोकने के लिए, ठीक है. That again, we have deep sea mining where we have extractive industries which are threatening the fragile ecosystem over the complete region or complete oceans or the high seas, which was initially it was not disturbed. तो अब वो जो fragile ecosystem है that has been disturbed by these explorative industries and the extractive industries as well. Now we are undergoing through the climate change, and we are talking about climate change चाहे कोई भी any international forum we are that is there, all right, or either it is the bilateral discussion, you will find that there are talks about the climate change that is happening right now. All right, because this is a major factor that is impacting our complete globe. Now, जब हम climate change की बात करें तो climate change is impacting our oceans as well, because 70% of the earth is water. So oceans are warming. Along with this, because carbon dioxide is dissolving in the water, that is leading to oceanic acidification as well, जो कि आपका marine life cycles को disrupt कर रही है. Again, this is another prominent factor. And when it comes to the water pollution or the oceanic pollution, there are oil spills, साथ ही साथ आपका जो है petroleum या plastic, chemicals, noise contamination जो कि आपका international waters में हो रहा है. So that is the requirement, that is the need of the hour, why this treaty was formulated, or what was the need for formulation of this treaty right now. Now, like I told you that when it comes to the unclause defines the jurisdiction. All right, unclause जो है वो आपका jurisdiction को आपका define करता है. When it comes to over here, you can see how the jurisdiction is defined. When it comes to the baseline, all right, जो आपका when we are talking about the coastal region, there is a baseline. All right, so up to baseline there are internal waters, or you can say archipelagic waters which are there. All right, and then comes the next area, that is the territorial zone or territorial sea. This territorial sea is basically the part of that nation or that particular country. All right, every single law is applicable over here. Every law are applicable in this region, and this is the part, or this is the region where the laws of the country it is applied, and this is up to 12 nautical mile from the baseline. The next 12 nautical miles are the contiguous zone. So from the baseline and up to 24 nautical miles, we have the contiguous zone. This is the next zone that is called as the contiguous zone, and this is basically region where we have very certain laws, financial laws and the other laws which are applicable, but criminal laws are not applicable in the contiguous zone. All right, then comes the exclusive economic zone, and when we are talking about exclusive economic zone, that is extended up to 200 nautical mile, but it could be extended up to the continental shelf or 350 nautical mile. It could be extended up to 350 nautical miles. So this is how, or in this region, in the exclusive economic zone or EEZ region, the country can exploit the resources which are available there for the economic needs and economic benefits. Now, when we are talking about the unclause, all right, so this is how the jurisdiction of the nations which are bordering the water bodies that had been laid down. Now, anything that is away from this exclusive economic zone, that comes under the high seas, and for regulating and for the equitable benefit sharing of the resources which are there in the high seas, that was the need why this treaty, High Seas Treaty or BBNJ Treaty, was formulated. Now, when it comes to the scope and geographical dimension, all right, so I have told you that when it comes to the high seas, it is beyond the 200 nautical miles from the coast, and there is no single nation that controls the high seas. There is exclusive economic zone that is from 0 to 200 nautical miles from the coast, and the coastal state or the coastal nation have the jurisdiction. And what are the India's interest when it comes to the high sea treaties is that we have a very extensive coastline and maritime zone that are situated. All right, we have extensive coastline, we have a very strategic oceanic gateway position when it comes to India's position. All right, Andaman and Nicobar are very close to Malacca Strait, which carries, or there is about 70% of the petroleum trade or petroleum transfer that happens from the Malacca Strait. At the same time, when we talk about the Arabian Sea, that is close to the Suez Canal, again, it is gateway to the European as well as the African waters. So again, when we are talking about the position of India is very much strategically located, and that is why this treaty or the UNCLOS treaty is very much important for India. Now, when it comes to the India and the high seas, what are the different programs or policies that we have? So we have Blue Economy Vision, where we are basically concentrated over the economic growth, and for the economic growth we are looking for the oceanic resources potential, and that is again important for the economic growth of the nation. There is a Sagar initiative, a strategic initiative, or it is also known as security and growth for all in the region. When it comes to the Sagar initiative, it has 5 different legs or 5 different initiatives which are there, which involves security of the nation of the region. It involves capacity building in the region, collective action, sustainable development, and even maritime engagement when it comes to the Indian Ocean region. All right, and also maritime biodiversity, because we have the Indian Ocean system or the region that is very much rich in the biodiversity, and the marine resources which are available here are basically, they are very much when it comes to the diversity. All right, and in fact when it comes to the maritime diversity, we have very greater maritime biodiversity that is there in the Indian Oceans, and that is why we have lots of marine protected areas that we have already established within the jurisdiction of UNCLOS in India. Alright, so when it comes to the oceanic governance, so the India's leadership will shape the regional as well as global outcomes in the future to come. Alright, now when we talk about the implementation of this High Seas Treaty, so I am talking about the right now, the data set or the facts. Alright, right now we have total 175 of the nations which are signatories, and they have already signed the treaty. But after signing of the treaty, there is need for the ratification. So the threshold that was needed was 60 nations they have to sign, and we have met this threshold, and we met this threshold on 19 September 2025. Now there is a 120-day time period afterwards which this treaty would be applicable. So now this treaty would be applicable, or it will come into force in January 2026, and total we have 75 ratification. I told you up to 1st of October 2025 we have Honduras, which was the 74th ratifying state or the country, and then we have state of Palestine which have ratified the treaty on 1st of October 2025. So we have in total 75 ratifications that had been done. That is more than the threshold that was required, that is 60 ratifications that were required over here. Now, why this, or what is this treaty all about? So I told you that this is about the marine genetic resources or MGRs, because these marine genetic resources we have when the UNCLOS was it was formulated and it came into force, UNCLOS said that the high sea resources, they would be for everyone. Alright, so the marine genetic resources as a common heritage of humankind, they would be utilized or they would be used, and when it comes to the high sea treaties or the BBNJ treaty, it insists on the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits that would be from the marine genetic resources or the MGRs. Then there is area-based management tools, which this treaty talks about, ABMT, and especially for the marine protected areas, so that they could be recognized and the biodiversity in these regions could be protected equally and also for everyone, because the marine resources as well as the marine protected areas, they are very crucial for the human protection as well. Then comes the environmental impact assessment for the events which are potentially impacting the we have marine protected areas, especially where we have the marine protected areas which are located in such regions where we have more than one nation which is involved. Alright, so there the environmental impact assessment should be done with the proper scientific and proper logical backing. So all these things have been included in the high sea treaties. Now, when it comes to the implementation challenges, there are total 4 implementation challenges. The first challenge is the uncertainty. We are talking about 2 things over here. One is that there is the common heritage principle. And this common heritage principle, it says that there would be equitable access and sharing, benefit sharing of the marine resources. And at the same time, it also says that there would be freedom of the high seas, that is, that there would be unrestricted rights of the states or nations to carry out navigation, resource exploitation, as well as the research activities. So both of these, when we are talking about principle of common heritage and the principle of freedom of high seas, they are contradictory in nature. One, we are saying that it is available, equitable sharing is available, benefit sharing is available for everyone, and when it comes to the freedom of high seas, we are saying that the freedom of high seas is there and any nation can go and exploit with the unrestricted rights the various resources which are available in the high sea zones. Alright, so both of them are contradictory. However, when it comes to the principle of common heritage, that is only applicable partially. And it is only applicable to the marine genetic resources. Alright, so that you have to understand. The next implementation challenge that we have is the equity and the benefit sharing among the countries which are there, especially the developed and the developing countries, because the developed countries have the technology. Alright, they have advanced technology to exploit the resources as compared to the developing countries. When it comes to the developed countries, they have technology and resources to exploit the marine genetic resources. There are concerns over the intellectual property rights if their technology is utilized by the developing countries, and also there is preferences for the lighter benefit sharing obligations which these developed nations have put forward. But at the same time, when we are talking about developing nations, what is their position? They have limited capacity to access to the marine resources because they do not have the advanced technology. At the same time, the demand for the equitable sharing of benefits is there from the developing nations because, like I said, common heritage or the common access to the common principle is applied over here. So they demand the equitable benefits from the marine genetic resources, and there is a common heritage principle which must be honored. So that is the stake of both developing countries as well as the developed countries that is there. Now, when we are talking about the marine genetic resources, they have very great potential. I told you about the pharmaceutical industries, alright, that rely on these marine genetic resources, as well as for biotechnology for the marine food industry as well. Alright, so who will benefit or who will profit from the marine genetic resources? That has to be seen. And obviously, when it comes to this, we know that the developed nation, they have upper hand when it comes to the technology for exploiting the marine genetic resources. Now, over here, there is a framework that had been included in the High Sea Treaty. This framework is for sharing both monetary as well as non-monetary benefits. Alright, there is a framework that had been included. Alright, we are saying that there is a common heritage principle that must be, honored. But when it comes to the honoring of this, how this will be honored? So there is a principle or framework that had been included in the High Sea Treaty, and that framework gives the monetary as well as non-monetary benefit. But over here, there is a catch that how it will be shared. So there is no clear demarcation. It is unclear on how such benefits will be calculated or shared between or among the developing nation. That is still not there. All right. Now, the next thing or the next implementation challenge come in the form of capacity constraint. Now, when it comes to the capacity constraints, let me tell you that the bigger countries like, for example, US, Russia and China, they have signed the treaty, but they have yet not ratified the treaty. Alright, they have not ratified the treaty. So this shows the reluctance of the big powers in joining the High Sea Treaty. At the same time, the small island state, they lack resources for ocean monitoring as well as enforcement of the High Sea Treaty. Alright, there is a technology gap where advanced monitoring systems are concentrated with the advanced nation, the wealthy nations, and also human capital. Alright, because there is need for scientific expertise. And these smaller nations do not have that scientific expertise, or they do not have the technology, they do not have the institutional capacity building that is there. So over here, when it comes to the promise of technology transfer, alright, the treaty promises that there would be technology transfer, but again, as I told you, when we were talking about the MGRs or marine genetic resources, that there would be sharing of the monetary as well as non-monetary benefits, but there is it is not clearly demarcated how the access or the sharing will be done. In the same way, the technology transfer had been included in the treaty, but how it will be implemented, that remains unclear over here, how the technology transfer will be done. The next implementation challenge that is there is basically about the governance complexity. When it comes to the oceans, it is not just the UNCLOS, but we have International Seabed Authority or ISA, we have IMO, International Maritime Organization, and we have regional fishery organizations which are there. So there are multiple existing bodies. So over here, the thing is that the regions or the different existing bodies which are there, they must be in a coordination. Alright, they must exist in coordination, and their coordination mechanisms are over here still undefined, how these different regional fisheries bodies along with IMO or ISA, that is International Seabed Authority, and International Maritime Organization, how they would be in a coordination or how the coordination mechanism will be done. At the same time, when we talk about the authority, there is no authority that have been taken or that have been talked about in the treaty. Alright, like for example, when it comes to who enforces violation in the international water. So there is no authority over here. Alright, or how do new maritime protected areas interact with the existing arrangements? Again, the treaty is silent over here. Alright, again, when we talk about the institutional framework, over here, the need of the hour is that there has to be a new conference of parties that has to be formed, or it is needed. Alright, I told you yesterday as well, what is a conference of parties? Basically, it is an annual meeting or annual gathering, and it is the topmost, the decision-making power when it comes to any of the international agreements or international institutions. So over here, the need of the hour is to constitute a conference of parties that will meet annually and will discuss the various issues that will pop up or that will creep up in the future. So that is the need of the hour, as well as there have to be scientific as well as technical bodies that must be established for the proper environmental impact assessment that has been spoken about in the treaty, or that finds its mention in the treaty. Alright, along with this, when we talk about it in the form of geography, alright, when we speak about this issue in the form of when we are taking it in a geographical sense, alright, so when it comes to the oceans, alright, the oceans are prominent for heat regulation. The 90% of the excess planetary heat is stored in the ocean, and I told you this is in the form of carbon dioxide sequestration. Alright, and it also increases the oceanic acidity as well. Alright, marine phytoplanktons, they produce 50% of the Earth's ocean, because the marine resources or the marine water bodies which are there on the globe is about 70% of the Earth's area. Alright, along with this, ocean absorb near about 25% of human carbon dioxide emission, and that is leading to ocean acidification as well. We have seen that ocean acidification is increasing because of this, and there are ocean currents which drive the global climate system. We have different oceanic currents, whether it is in Pacific Ocean, Indian Ocean, as well as in Atlantic Ocean, and therefore high seas governance is basically climate governance. We are protecting these waters, and by protecting these waters, it means that we are protecting the planetary climate change that is happening right now. Alright, now what are the socio-economic and environmental stake over here? The socio-economic and environmental stake is about marine biodiversity. We have millions of undiscovered species in the deep ocean. So they will be at the stake. At the same time, deep sea mining, where we have different minerals we are looking for right now for, for batteries, all right, for the EV system that we are producing, for the technology, but at what cost? And ultimately, there would be more of extraction that will happen after the High Seas Treaty. And also the regions where we have the marine organism, they are source for the life-saving, compounds, and it holds a very much importance for the pharmaceutical industry as well. All right. So that is again at the stake. And when it comes to the trillions of economic value that is there in the marine biodiversity, so that has a very prominent ecosystem services at the stake when it comes to the complete high seas that we are talking about right now. Now, what if this treaty fails? What will happen if this treaty fails, or what are the implications if there is a chance that this treaty fails? So there would be continued Wild West, where we will have the advanced nations that will keep on with the illegal, unreported and unregulating fishing. All right, there would be race to exploit the maritime resources which are there, or the maritime genetic resources which are there. There would be, because of this, there would be complete ecosystem collapse, where we will see irreversible habitat loss. All right, and when it is coming to the tipping point, we have reached, let me tell you that we have reached the tipping point when it comes to the coral reef ecosystem. So again, there would be irreversible habitat loss, there would be species extinction that will happen, and food chain disruption, and ultimately that will lead to complete collapse of the maritime ecosystem that we have. And ultimately all this, because we have, I told you that oceans hold very prominent importance when it comes to the climate governance. So that will have a climate impact as well. There would be weakened carbon sink, accelerated warming, and there would be feedback loops. So without governance, the high seas will become a tragedy of the commons at large. So that is, right now, you can understand that this treaty holds very prominence for the complete governance of the high seas that are there. Now, when we are talking about the strategic and policy implications for India, so the number one is that we are maritime leaders when it comes to the regional powers. All right, when it comes to the region, South Asia. So we are maritime leader, and of course that will provide us with a benefit or a stage for showcasing our maritime diplomacy leadership, and it will act as, or India will act as, a bridge between the developing as well as developed nations. All right, when there would be integration of the treaty obligation with blue economy goals, that will lead to ocean governance strategy for India as well. All right, when we are talking about the marine research infrastructure and monitoring capabilities, that will lead to capacity building investment as well. All right, so we are already exploiting or exploring resources in the Central Indian Ocean Basin. All right, CIOB. So again, that will lead to capacity building investment for India. All right, then when it comes to the regional cooperation, it will lead to Indian Ocean Rim initiatives for the collective action for the high seas, and as well as it will align the national laws with the international treaty obligations or commitment, and that will lead to domestic implementation of the high seas treaty for India. So that are the stakes for India. Now, when it comes to the UPSC aspirants, that is you, how this news or this complete perspective is important for you. Now, when it comes to GS Paper 1, we have geography as a subject included in GS Paper 1, which deals with ocean currents, climate patterns, oceanography, as well as spatial dimensions for governance. All right, in GS Paper 3, we have environment. All right, again, it holds importance for the environment as well, because we are talking about biodiversity conservation, we are talking about climate change mitigation and sustainable development goals. All right, GS Paper 2, when we are talking about international relation, again, multilateral negotiation and treaties, India's foreign policy priorities and UN system and globe governance are part of your GS Paper 2. And when it comes to GS Paper 4, that is ethics, common heritage of humankind. All right, when it comes to intergenerational equity and global justice frameworks, again, all these find a mention in your ethics. So this is all why this news is important for your upcoming UPSC examination. Alright, now what is the way forward from agreement to the action? The first thing is universal ratification, where the big powers like we have US, we have Russia as well as China, they come together and they ratify the treaty and lead to implement the treaty in the true sense of the spirit of the framework that has been designed by the High Sea Treaty. Alright, also there have to be a conference of parties that has to be established, scientific bodies and proper enforcement mechanism. The gaps when we have spoken about, where we have spoken about the gaps about the technology transfer, we have spoken about the gaps of the transfer of the benefits, monetary or non-monetary benefits when it comes to the marine genetic resources. So that has to be laid down properly and strong institutional framework has to be made when it comes to the High Sea Treaty. Alright, along with this, technology transfer, training, financial assistance for the developing nations must be provided so that they must develop their capacity in the exploiting the high sea, the high seas for their own benefit, and also a transparent, equitable mechanism for marine genetic resources benefit should be provided when it comes to the High Seas Treaty. All right. Now, after going through this session, I give you a thought for pondering. All right, a thought for ponder, a thought to have a deep thought about it, and that thought is, or that framework is, ठीक है, इसको जरूर सोचिएगा after going through the complete session, and that is, should deep sea mining be paused until treaty mechanism are fully operational? है ना, जब तक treaty mechanism पूरी तरीके से operational है, तब तक क्या high seas के लिए जो हम mining कर रहे हैं, deep sea mining कर रहे हैं, that should be paused or not? ठीक है. Now, you have to keep certain things in mind. All right, there are certain dilemmas in mind that you have to keep. That is precautionary principles versus economic development. All right, irreversible environmental damage risk. Then technology readiness as well as regulatory gaps which are there. Equity in access to resources and alternative sources for the critical mechanism. इसी के साथ साथ एक और question that I will give you to think about, and that is, what role should be India should be playing in shaping the future of high seas governance? All right, so these are the two questions that you have to think about and you have to ponder about. You have to come up with your own thoughts, and that is required when it comes to clearing the UPSC exam. All right, so I have told you that you have to develop your critical reasoning, critical thinking power that is required for your UPSC exam. All right, now what is the conclusion? That we are moving forward and we are moving towards the end of the session. So there is a new era of oceanic governance that we are seeing, where High Seas Treaty or BBNJ Treaty, it represents historic opportunity to regulate the high seas as well as to protect our planet from the impacts of the climate change. All right, there are certain implementation gaps which remains critical, whether it is legal text or the enforcement action. So that is the hard work that lies ahead, and that is why we have spoken that a conference of party must be established for the High Sea Treaty, and we have India's engagement because of the India's position, a strategic position that we have, that is essential for us. All right, and we must lead in shaping the equitable, effective oceanic governance, and the health of high seas determine the health of our planet. So therefore, governance is no longer optional, but it is imperative, and the high seas should be governed very well with the scientific principles and thinking about the future generation. That is, a sustainable development should be there when it comes to the high seas. All right, so that would be all in today's session. I hope that you have liked this session. We will be meeting again with another topic of interest which will be crucial for your upcoming exams in UPSC. So that would be all, but before going ahead, do not forget to like, share as well as subscribe to our channel. That will be all. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care and Jai Hind.